And we're live. Let's give it a few seconds here. All right, I should have done that before we went live, but we are live. So I'll record this separately. And I'm not getting much of a signal here. Let me double check what my source is. May have to start this again. Yeah, I think I'm going to start this again. Well, it should be the mic. Okay, well, I'm here, and yeah, it just doesn't look like I'm getting the same signal that I was last night. So we'll see how that goes. So yell at me in the chat if there is a huge difference in the sound. I think this is coming from somewhere else. Just a sec. Let me listen. Technical. How about some playback here? Yep. Yeah, I'm getting some weird. What? Getting some weird playback as well. All right, let me see. Nope, that's totally the wrong mic. Yeah, sometimes we get a weird... Oh, strange. Let's see here. How's this? There we go. I think that's the right mic. All right, give me a few seconds here and then we'll get started. All right, that should be enough for noise reduction. Sorry, I had the wrong mic on the recorder here. So tonight is the Bestiary of Trudvang Chronicles. This is a well-done book. The book itself is nothing special. It's the same glossy cover, some nice Paul Bonner art on the front that goes into the slipcase set, but this is a themed bestiary like you get in some RPG world. So this is Jorgi's Bestiary. So it's written from the point of view of a researcher of Trudvang. So it's kind of colorful talk. We'll skip the stat lines and the special abilities and things from all of the creatures because it's specific to this Trudvang Chronicles system that I don't know if anybody's going to play. And this was actually missing from that collected volume that Command did. So this is a nice treat. And just if you're, want to hear a little bit about the setting, there's a very fun description of all of the various fauna of Trudvang. So we'll go through this and see how it goes. But you can enjoy the Paul Bonner. Let's do the credits right now. So the interior art is Alvaro Tapia, Thomas Van Veeg, Justin Gerard, and of course Paul Bonner. So there's really great art. So if you just want to watch the art, I'll keep the pages open while I read the entries. And so yeah, this is, and I think these PDFs are still available if this would be something fun to read. I don't think the stats are going to be that useful. And I'm curious if Free League will be doing something like this for Bestiary, for the Trudvang port that they're doing. That would be wonderful to see this, especially in a nicer format. And that could happen through crowdfunding. So we'll see what they do. But let's get started. So I'll skip the explanations of the game mechanics for the stat lines, and we'll just go straight to the introduction. So, Jorgi's Bestiary. Introduction. The majority of you know me as Jorgi Granfjord, but my true name is Jorgi. No matter what has been said about me in the past, I hail from Meatland, and my Westmarchian name I was given the day my father left me in the hands of in the school of Gave in Ervidor. For he thought my life was much better spent in the service of the one true God than in the halls of warriors and houses of Vitnar weavers, as my brothers before me. Throughout the years, I have labored to create many versions of my great work. It is commonly known as Jorgi's Bestiary. For more than 60 years, I have noted down my testaments to share my knowledge of the beasts and creatures of Trudvang. But know this, in your hands now lies the last writings that left me before I finally laid down the pen and received the light of Gave. I know it burns so fiercely in my chest that when I lay down my utensils, I do so to go to rest and await the light. My journeys began in Westmark and brought me to the faraway Stormlands, across the ice-cold Alpines and dangerous seas. I met great-hearted and generous creatures, but also there were wretched and hateful. With Gave on my side, I was awarded the opportunity to witness the beauty and the grand scale of Trudvang, as well as its wilds and dark side. When, in the autumn of my life, I went to retire in the monastery of Ervidor, I recalled the dangers of the wild and the mysteries of the forest and the toils of the roaring oceans. What you hold in your hands is more than just my work. It is the work of hundreds, possibly thousands of men, elves, dwarves, and other beings that have shared their ancient knowledge in ways both great and small. May this bestiary be of aid to all wanderers and adventurers who venture into the untamed wilds of Trudvang. Beasts. The vast wilderness of Trudvang is so filled with beasts and animals of different kinds that it would require several books on the subject just to describe a small portion of them. I would write about the horrible barnyard, and that makes the largest bear look small. The massive mastamont in the north, with its large tusks, incredibly thick fur. The Werner ox of Ovanga, that are trained to be fearsome riding animals. Dulagung, the mythical Lund, the silver-haired moose, whose crown can be several fathoms broad. Or of all the many forms of swine, such as frostboar, bruthog, tonalsvine, just to name a few, in the great breadth of Trudvang's fauna. Alas, I chose to include only some of the more spectacular beasts in this tome. Galter. Put 2 cow's eyes on a plate in the forest, and come back the following day. If the eyes are gone, there are Galter about. If the plate is gone, one can be sure that there are trolls. There are many ways to know whether there are Galter in a forest, for this hard-necked fighter loves to stumble about a forest for food. Usually the people of the woods make a sign in the shape of 2 crevices in a tree to warn other wanderers about the Galters. If there are 4 crevices, that means the Galters are led by a king Galter, and the fool who wouldn't be afraid before perhaps found a reason to be. Galters are found in the eastern Darkwood, and get their aggressiveness from the wild boars that live there. The Galter is a little humanoid, somehow smaller than a dwarf, which resembles a strange cross between a little troll and a boar. The people of the East have no good explanation as to why these beasts exist, other than the trolls might have noticed the difference between one of their own kind and an animal, and therefore this crossbreeding has taken place. We know that trolls are dumb creatures, and I suppose that this is a possibility, even if it is a strange one. The Goltirs are hunters that have no issues with eating their own kin, the wild boars, but they prefer to eat moose and wild deer. They are violently strong and resilient beasts that are hard to defeat once they choose to fight. Their fearlessness drives them into a sort of frenzy that they hunt and enter battle that can be likened to that of the berserkers of the Stormlands. They live in small groups of 3 to 15 individuals that burrow into the earthly dens under great rocks in the deepest forests. It is very unusual for Goltirs to mingle with other races, even trolls. They prefer to stick to themselves. They have no developed language, but communicate through advanced grunts and sounds. Sometimes, several Goltirs gather in the same place and run through the land. This is called a Gult walk. It is considered dangerous to be around such a gathering. Why they gather and what their purpose is uncertain. But most likely it is a sort of mating ritual. The Goltirs that impress the most is the one that travels the greatest distance at the greatest speed. Those Gult walks can last for several moon cycles. Giant snake. The strange tracks led me down the little lake. There I saw some tracks that showed me that the beast had its home there. For several tracks led down into the lake and out further into the woods. At first, I thought they had found the tracks of a lindworm, but as far as I know, lindworms do not dwell in water. I heard of giant snakes before, but I've never seen one. Therefore, I decided, somewhat stupidly, one might think, after the fact, to hide in a tree that stood at the edge of the lake. Honestly, I do not know what I was thinking when climbing up that tree. After adept studies that various snakes, I should have known that they have an excellent sense of smell and are also skilled tree climbers. But I must blame a momentary confusion, for when I sat there hugging the tree, I was quite satisfied with my hiding place. I do not know how long I sat there. I even started slumber for a moment, but when I heard something from the ground below, I rarely managed to catch a glimpse of the giant snake's tail slithering from the lake and further into the forest to search for food. I cursed myself that I had fallen asleep during my guard, but I decided to remain in the tree for some time. The snake returned to the depths of the lake, I thought. I soon realized my mistake. The snake must have caught my scent, for it did not take much time before I saw it come out of the forest with its great head high above the ground, pointed toward me. However, its body slithered around a rock and a tree. It always held it pointed it straight at where I sat, petrified by horror. I realized I would not make much of a match for the snake, and cursed the foolishness that now led me to my death. The great snake had reached the tree in which I sat, but just started its advance up the tree, then suddenly stopped. It was as if I had smelled something, or suddenly it pointed its attention into the lake. I searched with my eyes in that direction, but I could only see, all I could see were the rings scattered on the black calm surface of the water. The snake suddenly left the tree and graciously slithered into the lake. Soon after, the lake began to boil. I understand that a fight was taking place below the surface, and even I was curious. I left my hiding place and quickly escaped the dreadful location. There were several types of snakes, big and small, poisonous and non-poisonous, in the wilderness of Trudvang. In the great oceans, one will find sea serpents, and in lakes and ponds, one will find the lake serpent that can change color to adapt to the background. High up in the branches of the great forest lurks the forest snake, And in the underground of Trudvang lives the cave serpent, a black menace that slithers around in unending caves in hunt for food. All the snakes function in essentially the same way, but have various distinct abilities. The sea worm is the largest of all snakes. There are stories that some are so big that they have swallowed entire ships in one bite. Many people say that the sea serpent is not a type of snake at all, but its own creature. The forest snake is the second largest type. It has light yellow skin, almost like an albino, and lives high among the crowns of the trees. In spite of its large size, it is an excellent hunter and sneaks up on its victims from above. The cave serpent comes in third in size of the greatest snakes. Its scales are black, and its eyes are the color of glowing amber. It resides in the underground tunnels of caves, where it lives off the few creatures that dwell there. Perhaps it is not much food in the tunnels. The cave serpent is constantly on the hunt for more. In contrast, the forest serpent, the cave serpent are excellent swimmers, and it uses its skill in the rapids of the underground, where it hunts for fish and other food. The lake serpent's scales are normally dark green and with nuances of brown spots. The scales have the same character as fish scales and can therefore become dry. The lake serpent's on the bottom of the lake, where it likes to lie dormant in wait for an animal to come to drink. Since the serpent needs air to breathe, it will let its nose stick out of the surface. The lake serpent cannot spend prolonged time on land because its scales will quickly dry up. A stranded lake serpent will die from dehydration in a few hours. Giant spider. In many tomes, there are inaccuracies written about how giant spiders are intelligent and highly dangerous beings. That they are dangerous, I very much agree with, but whether they are greatly intelligent, I must question. You may ask how I can be sure of this. I shall tell you. It was when I was traveling through the dragon's forest that I ended up next to the net of a giant spider. If you only knew how hard these nets are to discover, you would perhaps not laugh at how my fate almost ended there. Each attempt I made to get loose only seemed to further cement my captivity, as it became harder and harder to free myself from the sticky and thin webs. The horse I had ridden was strong enough to get loose, but no matter how I tried to lure the poor nag to me, she refused to come closer. She stood there, snorting, while I tried everything to get her closer to me. When the night came, once I had given up my attempts to free myself, I heard something move in the branches of the forest. Of course, I thought this was the spider coming to see whether it had caught anything in its webs. I prayed that my end would come swiftly and painlessly. How absolutely godsmacked I was when I saw a knot on a tree trunk in front of me, and it suddenly took the form and shape of a face itself. I understood at once that this was a eardress. Suddenly, something calming came over me in the company of this being of supreme knowledge, that I felt that the branch hands of the eardress freed me. It's indescribable, and I thus will not attempt to do so. After seeing my horse and giving her some care, I sat on the ground in front of the tree to speak to the eardress. It was that I learned the truth about giant spiders. The eardress told unto me that giant spiders are smarter than the small ones we see every day. Of course, they are far more dangerous, but far smarter or more knowledgeable. But far from smarter or more knowledgeable. Then I asked why people believed that the Idras had been forced to leave their forest because of the giant spiders. How the giant spiders were able to wield Vintner like the great Vintner weavers, and how they were even able to ensnare a dragon. For all of this, I had indeed read. The Idros replied that all I said had truly happened, but it quickly added that it was not spiders that wielded such power. It was mighty demons that were behind the mark of the spider that they had made in history. I was baffled. Demons? The Idros explained to me that the demons had an easier time possessing giant spiders than any other creatures in the world. It was something to do with the eyes of the spiders, though what that was I could not quite understand. But for some reason it was easier for a demon to take control of a creature with more than one set of eyes. I asked if the demons could be found in even the smallest spiders, and the Idros answered that yes, it was so, but in the form of a small spider, a demon cannot cause much damage. This was something I, of course, agreed with. Then I asked if the spider that lived in this forest was possessed by a demon, and the answer was no. Just as I was about to ask a new question, the Idros stopped me and said that it felt that the spider was on its way back to inspect its net, and I would do my best to find my way out of there. There are two types of giant spiders, net spiders and eye spiders. Both species are both dangerous and can use their special ability to devour great prey. Net spiders can fire a heavy net to ensnare their victims. The eye spiders use a hypnotizing gaze to paralyze their victims. Both species have great jaws that they attack with. The giant spiders live in the shadows of the forest, where they build their nests high up in trees or down on the earthen dens. Net spiders prefer the tops of trees, while the eye spider prefers the cool and underground den. Giant spiders live alone in the forest. Often they will hang their prey from trees so that it will rot and be easier to eat later. From time to time, humans and trolls gather around an old spider. This usually has to do with different cults or worshippers that live in the forest and make sacrifices to honor the spider. 9 out of 10 times, giant spiders will attack with surprise from trees. These senseless creatures lay eggs every 500 years. During their long lives, the creature's already hard exterior transforms into an almost stone-like skin, an organic mass that the spider sends through its pores from the inside. It lies on the top of its shell and becomes an extra defense. The shell can withstand both fire and steel, and it is not unusual for both moss and mushrooms to grow on a giant spider. Griffin. The wild folk on the plains of Midland that call themselves the Okis both fear and hate the mighty griffin, a creature with the body of a lynx and the wings of an eagle. It is a powerful beast that attacks both cattle and humans, but it is hunted by the Okis for its beautiful feathers and skin. From the time that they are children, the Okis learn the mighty art of hunting trolls and other creatures of mischief with younger griffins. But the most skilled Okis hunters will manage to tame their own griffins that they ride through the air. To catch the younger griffin and tame it is a long and arduous process that often ends in the griffin killing the hunter. During my travels, I encountered an Okis on many occasions, and sometimes I was allowed to come along for griffin hunting, but my strongest memory of the encounter with a griffin was when I was the Valsagian Knights of Silvtroder. They were hunting griffins high in the mountains in the Silverspear Mountains, that there lived a breed of griffin that is smaller than the Midlandian one, but was fierce in its frenzy, and it was not shy from attacking herm trolls and some other Fyrtjusir. The knights told me that the silver griffin, as it was called, has claws that are much sought after, since one can use them to make knives, spears, and beautiful jewelry. A knight that carries the griffin's claw around his neck will increase his reputation and his standing, since most people know how hard it is to capture a silver griffin. The Midlandian griffin has a wingspan of 10 to 15 meters. The Okis speak of the old griffins with up to 20 meters between the tips of their wings. Their eagle-like great claws are sharp and can burrow deep into the flesh of the enemy. Griffins' great beaks are hard as flint, and in the eyes you can see the prey in great detail when it is high in the sky. The Midlandian griffin lives mostly on the earth in earthen dens in the great steppe, while silver griffins live in nests that are very much like the ones eagles build on high cliffs. A griffin head and front legs are of an eagle, and the body of a warg, and the wings, it is an aggressive and constantly on the hunt. Night Ulm. Many a strange thing I have seen and heard from people all over Trudvang, and one story that has forever etched itself into my mind, even though it was many years since I heard the story, is that the blood-sucking Rogtans, created after having been infected by a night for the bite of the night is dangerous and puts the victim in a sort of undead state where they only have a taste for blood. The night is hunted for its long claws, but since it is said that a potion from these will create a universal cure to heal flesh and cure diseases. But the night is a shy creature that hides in the deepest forests. It hunts high up in the crowns of pines, glides between the trees with its bat-like wings, and has its nests in underground caves where they can live in great numbers. In Vistergolp, there is an old myth about a knight named Thodon who fell victim to a night and became a Rugtain. He was driven by hatred and thirst for blood, and would shut himself in his farm for many years. He brought nothing but death to the community where he lived, and many innocent souls paid with their lives. Eventually, the people managed to drive him from the land with fire and silver. They hurt the knight until he fled. It is said that the Rugtain, like the night can be damaged only by fire or weapons forged from silver. The night lives alone in the groups of up to 30 individuals. The creatures are most active during the night, as it hates sunlight. The night nests deep in caves where the rays of the sun cannot reach them. They sleep hanging from the roof with their gripping feet. Night have not developed much ability to think. They live on blood from all types of warm bodies. Thornbeast. Many a time I have asked myself how a small bat can grow into a horrid beast whose pure stench can make the hardest warrior fall to his knees and beg for their sweet mother's mercy. The answer is thornroot. For a long time, it is a well-hidden secret that the wild arcs fed bitter thornroot to little bats, and in this way created a beast that Trudvang would have done well without. Ever since the age of the yarnworm, the arcs have used thornroot in this means of inebriation, and it was known that the root makes barbarians numb and violent, but the effect on the bats were unknown. It seems as if eating the thornroot is a direct cause of aggression and growth that has a greater effect on the bats. When the small winged creatures consume thornroot, they grow quickly into great dangerous beasts that the arcs can then mate with similar beasts, and thereby Thornbeast is born. The thornroot makes the beast thirsty for blood and hungry for in a most unnatural and gluttonous way. Its body is constantly rotting from within, producing a pungent stench of death and decay, which in turn makes the beast all the more aggressive. I thank the light of Gave upon Trudvang that the thornroot is an unusual vegetable that grows only in certain caves in the barren and unreachable lands in the northwest. I also thank all the holy knights in the west that the lifespan of a thorn beast is limited to around 20 years. For if, like the dragons, it had a longer lifespan, our world would be littered with the most terrible and highly unpleasant beasts. The oversized winged lizards have fed on thornroot and human flesh for many thousands of years, and that they have mutated into a completely different race. Not even their diet has changed. Would this bloodthirst and hunger of the thorn beast change? Large, strong tusks grow from its mouth, and its empty eyes reflect a corpse-pale light during the night. A normal-sized thorn beast measures 10 to 15 meters from wingtip to wingtip, and they have a grand height of 2.5 meters. Like many other winged beasts, the thorn beasts prefer to attack from the air and engage the enemy while flying. It was most often approached from a low altitude and attacked by lunging at with its strong bite while it is side by side with its victim. Then the thorn beast seldom lands during conflict, making it less vulnerable. The thorn beast can, of course, attack with its feet firmly on the ground. As such time, it will often use its bite and 2 claws. Wild and free-roaming, thorn beasts are usually much larger, more aggressive, and more bloodthirsty than those kept in captivity. Thorn beasts kept in bindings will obey their caretaker and the rider blindly to a degree that makes them prepared to die for their master. Very few individuals succeed in taming a thorn beast, even if it is very young. In Trudvang, this is usually attempted only by the arcs. In rare cases, mighty wizards have successfully tamed great thorn beasts. Trollbull. In Becent, I learned that what we call a trollbull is called a mynox, probably after the Elvish word nokka, which means horn. One can hear about trollbulls across all of Trudvang, but what sets mynock apart from the trollbulls from the north they have more fur than those in the southern Trudvang. Trollbulls that live in Soj have longer horns than those that live in Darkland. Like the Gultir, trollbulls are aggressive and dangerous. They lack a developed language, but are said to be skilled craftsmen. I think this seems quite odd. How can a creature that has not learned to speak forge a sword? I have heard of even met trollbulls many times during my travels. On 2 occasions, my traveling companion ended up in a frenzied battle with trollbulls. One time, it was so close to death that it must have been by the grace of Gave that I was not put on the pile of dead. One other time, I myself plunged a spear into a trollbull. The men of Beideland then quickly cut out its heart, and offered it to me to eat. According to their traditions, this would fill me with some of the creature's spirit and vitality. In truth, I have never felt so invigorated and strong as I did after eating the heart, a feeling that lasted for weeks. Most feared of all trollbulls is the mythical Hjörmbull. It is said that they are a huge breed of trolls that use magical abilities to protect themselves from harm. It has been several hundred years since anyone claims to have seen a living Hjörmbull, but many knights of Silftrunder still speak of the wild beasts. Supposedly, the Hjörmbulls once were tamed by the dwarves for war. With fire and mitraka, they made the monsters bow and serve them in battle. One can find trollbulls all over Trudvang, but they are most frequent on the Great Plains in the western lands. They have no set places where they live, but wander seasonally to new hunting grounds. A trollbull is a large humanoid that has a highly developed musculature. On its tail and fur-clad body sits an impressive bull head with long horns that it uses in combat. Troll bulls eat everything, but prefer a diet of grass, dead animals, and game that they hunt. The human body has only one belly, but troll bulls have 4 smaller bellies. It is not rare that the troll bull will eat individuals of their own kind, but never from the same herd. Their heart, especially, a highly prized piece of food, since it is believed that these organs have supernatural powers. The troll bull is a herd animal that gathers in groups. Its limited intelligence makes it hard for them to live and think like humans. Even if there are many attributes and abilities that humans have, they seldom abandon their herd, which is why it is unusual to encounter fewer than 10 or 20 individuals at a time. Troll bulls are generally not a species of war and battle. However, the bulls of the herd, the males, are very aggressive and will attack if someone steps out on their turf. Often they will fight with their horns and with great iron clubs. Warg Beast. Without a doubt, the Warg Beast is one of Trudvang's most horrid predators. Garm, Sko, Warg, the beast has many names, and it is tamed by the wild and troll folk as riding animals. The Garm is the greatest of all Warg beasts. The Skull is double the size of the normal wolf, while the Warg itself is the smallest one. Not considering the normal wolves, which are the lesser cousins of warg beasts, it is said that were once Garm that had a back height of more than 7 meters, and that they hunted giants and other great beasts. Fortunately, this was a long time ago. Today, most common Garm has a back height of 2 to 4 meters, and the warg itself is the only as large as a wolf, but has a stronger body and larger head than its smaller cousin. I could not possibly list all of the times that I have seen warg beasts or heard their howlings from my camp. However, it's as many times as I have encountered trolls. Without a doubt, the warg beast is the most common danger that one will encounter in the wild. They like to prowl around settlements, and in the Stormlands, one should be especially beware. When the deep and long winters come, it is not unusual for a pack of warg beasts to gather around farms and await humans that live there. The hide of the Garm is especially sought, as it is to be protection from the cold in the great ice plains. The fur is thick and good, but much lighter than the fur of the Mastomant. I have been told that giving someone the fur of a Garm in the Stormlands is like giving away a well-made blade in Meatland. Or, a Stormlander once said to me, I need no blade to kill for. I have my hands and my strength, but a winter without fur. I shall walk beside Stormy before the night turns to day. In the utmost northeast, in a cold and desolate kingdom that the Stormlanders have named Wildland, the warg beast had a prominent role in the humans' lives. There are many tribes that worship the dangerous beast as they did before Gerbanis took hold of the land. Here there are people that tame Garm to ride in the same way that we in the West ride horses. One time I saw 4 wild berserkers from the wildlands riding Garm. It was a truly mighty sight. The great and dangerous beast bent to the will of the warriors and did as they commanded. I have heard that the wild Armus or Fjall do the same. Beings of the Mist. As my friend and Vitner Weaver, Risterman, has said several times, there is a strong connection between the mist and beings that originate from it. As if a border to the realm of the dead lies particularly close when the mist of Trudvang grows thick. and perhaps that is the case. The Midlandian knowledge seeker, Irwin Merwina, once devoted her life to the study of things in the mist, and wrote that the mist in Trudvang in reality is part of Misthal, a type of connection that defies the laws of the world and penetrates the world of the living. But what I cannot understand or find anything about in writings of Ilwelen is why there are so few mighty beings of the mist, but so many weak ones here in Trudvang. For it is true that there are far more Sunhills than whites in Trudvang. This goes against the belief that only the strongest can take hold and manifest in the world of the living. Of course, that there are few whites and Drogar, but more Lichtgube and Salhin is better than any and the other way around. But one would think that strong beings of the mist, like whites and Drogar, would have an easier time entering our world and remaining here. Many thinkers have their own theories on this question, but there is so much wisdom in the words of Ilwin that has noted in her many collections. From what I can gather, after having read more than half of her material, even if she never spells it out clearly, I believe that the reason for this contradiction is that the Watchers of Misthal are occupied with controlling the beings that cause the most trouble in Trudvang, and thus allow the weak ones to pass. Barrowhite. Even though I had rarely seen elves shimmer, I understand that what was moving across the night sky was something very special. My travel company told me while we stood mesmerized, watching the strange light phenomena out of all elven shimmers they had seen dress the nightmare sky here in the north, this was the biggest and the most awe-inspiring of them all. Everyone was certain that there was something far greater at work here. I am rather sure that no one could have predicted that what would take place later, much less connect it to the great things that were in motion at the time, for as far as I know, the elven shimmer has nothing to do with the beings of the mist, and yet the days passed, and each night we could see the heavenly phenomena in its unchanged strength. It was on the fourth day that we reached a field filled with ruins from long-lost times and cultures. No one out of our troop saw any harm in sheltering overnight in an old ruin. But in hindsight, I regret the choice of this resting place. We had just gotten to supper as the elven shimmer grew in rhythm, the darkness spreading around us. At first, Jonulf thought he heard something out in the fields. Then his brother, Svein, swore that he had heard something too. But no matter how much I concentrated, I could not hear anything, and disregarded their concerns as nothing. The evening soon rippled into night, and many times both Janulf and Svein suddenly stopped whatever they were doing just to listen. I was observing some parchment when I suddenly noticed Svein rise up and left the camp without speaking a word to any of us. He continued out into the darkness without paying any mind to our calls. Janulf remarked that he was most likely going out to relieve himself, but Svein's eyes, I saw he was worried. A great amount of time passed, and we started calling for Svein. With no reply, Janulf grabbed his weapon and went to see what happened, and then he too disappeared into the complete darkness. A long time passed, and I sat there, watching the darkness without really seeing or hearing anything. I once more called the brothers without any answer. Suddenly, I heard a terrible shriek that forced me to clutch my ears and curl into the fetal position. I cannot remember how long the shriek went on, but The absolute horror I felt that moment made my heart beat hard and my stomach ache, so that I spilled the evening supper onto the grass. Silence once again lay like a thick cloak over the field. I crawled up from the ground, still trembling with fear. For a moment I thought to run for the darkness to see what had happened to my traveling companions, but my feet could not bear my weight, and I found myself sitting with my back against the ruin, clutching Svein's short sword. I'm sure I need not add that I did not sleep at all that night. When the sunlight again spread across the field, I took my gear and departed as fast as I could. When I later returned to the village nearby and told them what happened by the ruins, I was informed that they were in fact haunted by a barrow wight. According to the village elders, the wights have been there since the prehistoric time of the world. She warned me not to visit the ruins during the night, for the wights hated the living and would slay any who ventured there at night. The barrow wight is a type of wight that is heavily tied to a place where it was buried, often the barrow, cairn, or other enclosed place. There it can also be a tomb or a mound of rocks. In the elder days, before Gave was at our side, people believed that the barrow wights was an undead that had come again because someone had not sent enough gifts with the dead, and therefore they could not travel to their supposed side, the other side. Others spoke of wights that awoke because of powerful objects and artifacts that had been buried with them, which made it hard for the dead one to let go of our world. The barrow wight awakens to life because its powerful longing for something or someone that is in the dead one's tomb. It can be an object, another body, or even the burial place itself. It is not unusual for several barrow wights are in one place at the same time, since many great men and kings are often buried in the same place. Only humans and elves can become barrow wights, since a wight awakens to life relatively soon after the dead one has been buried. It keeps much of the appearance of the dead person. Often, both flesh and skin remain on the wight. The empty, black eye holes, however, glow with a bone-white light when the sun has set. Like most of the undead, barrow wights are most active during the nighttime, or in the fog, since the bonds to Mistral are strong there. The wights carry a hatred against all living things, and will not hesitate to kill anyone who trespasses into the burial place. Very rarely, barrow wights leave their tombs to go out into the world. These wights have sworn to, for example, reclaim an object or artifact that has been stolen from their tomb, get revenge on the one who slew the dead person, or something along those lines. These barrow wights are very dangerous, since it is hard to know them for what they are. Their external sign may be glowing eyes, which can easily be disguised by a hefty hood. These barrow wights often intermingle with people in taverns that lie on the borders of wilderness to gain information about the thing that made them leave their tomb. Beinbeter. If I could regret only one thing of all the foolish things I have done during my travels across Trudvang, it would be the first one. Since my childhood, we Westmartians have heard terrible stories about the Beinbeter. As scared as I was when I was a little boy, I was just as determined to reveal once and for all that there are in fact no gnawer of the dead. My first mission as a bestiologist was therefore to not study this creature, but to prove that it did not exist at all, something I would come to regret. It was said in Silftrunder, on the plain below the Silver Mountains, there was a place where a banebaiter dwelled, for it was the old burial site, and all knew it was in such places that one would find the creature. Armed with confidence, 2 horses, and a tracker, I left the monastery in Ervidor and ventured into the lands of the knights in the north. I shall not spend too many lines in the journey itself, for no matter how much I write, I wish it would be otherwise. I cannot be blind to the fact that I was wrong. The banebaiter is real and very much exists. What I discovered there, and even later on, is that the banebaiter feeds on corpses when it is awake during the night, and hides in earthy dens and bushes during the day. It lives on the marrow from dead humans and animals, most likely also from elves and dwarves, and mayhaps also trolls. But this is nothing that I have confirmed, for the reason is it is always where humans are buried that I have encountered the banebaiter. In Varane, they say that one can destroy a banebaiter only with prayers of power. I have not confirmed this either. What I do know is that the banebaiter carries with it a horrid stench. It is unlike any stench of trolls or outhouses, but more like the farts of Queen Rogard, if you know that fairy tale. It took me a good week to get rid of the stench that permeated my clothes when I encountered my first banebaiter. I still feel sick to my stomach and think about it all the time. A banebaiter is a primitive beast created from a man who has been infected with a death plague. It dwells exclusively in the places where it can suck marrow from out of the bones that make its diet. The banebaiter is utterly aggressive and hard to battle. Dark Dweller. Unwillingly, I witnessed the madness that took place in a small village. The blood priest held the village in an iron grip and had promised his followers the greatest of harvests and the richest hunting ever if they made great sacrifices to their gods. The bloodthirsty villagers had captured me about 1 day's march away from the village, and at first I did not understand that they meant any harm to me. But soon I understood that I was to be sacrificed to their gods. I was in a wooden cage. I stood horrified, watching the priests cut open one poor animal after another and letting their blood flow down upon the great sacrificial pool. As the animals that were killed became bigger and therefore more valuable, I could see the change in the blood priest and his acolytes. At first, silent and calm, they would now be a shouting crowd that roared and cheered as the blood washed down upon them and the sacrificial pool. The ceremony, or whatever it was that I involuntarily took part in, soon became an inferno of blood and lusty screams. I heard an excessive sacrifice before, and it was certain that this was such a sacrifice, for the ceremony had clearly gone overboard when the grey troll, or perhaps it was a poor half-breed, was carried forth to the priest. With horror, I watched as the howling troll was brutally trapped in its chains that crowned the top of the pole. Troll or no troll, I could not help it. At the moment, I felt one with him, and lost 2 tears when I watched the poor creature being lifted up on the pole. Suddenly, the villagers and the priests grew silent, so that the only thing that was heard was the troll's horrid cries for help. After a moment or two, the most macabre ceremony that I have ever witnessed in my life began. The details are so horrid and utterly dreadful that I chose not to write a single word about them. In the middle of this ritual, I met the gaze of the blood priest, who watched me with hungry eyes, drool pouring from his mouth. And I understand that this was what would have been the high point of the ritual, but now it was only a dreadful foreplay before I was to be sacrificed as the climax of the evening. The villagers stood as if bewitched and watched as the priest skinned the grey troll. I think that no one but me noticed how the ground began to shake. First it was weak. It was a weak shake, and then several times again, harder and harder. I hardly believed my eyes when I saw how the ground began to tremble and move beneath the sacrificial pole. Up from the ground rose a large and terrible creature consisting of old bones, roots, branches, and earth, all soaked in the day's blood. The blood priest and his disciples stood as if they were bound by some spell, staring at the horror that rose from the earth. The dark dweller, for I at once understood that this was such a creature, grabbed the blood priest with one great hand, and at the other it ripped the head from the priest's shoulders. Enraged, the dark dweller threw the body in the air, and by luck it landed on the cage, in which I was trapped, breaking it. As the dark dweller killed everyone and everything it came upon, I managed to flee the village, never looking back. The screams of death and horror followed me for a long time as I ran across the open fields. Long after the screams had died, I fell to the ground, unable to take another step. In some cases, I have heard wild folk in the innermost parts of Darkwoods that have been able to tame dark dwellers with promises of sacrifice and more blood. In this way, they have gained horrid allies in arms for which they decide to conquer new lands and small villages. In some places, things have gone too far for people to worship the dark dwellers and make sacrifices in their honor. Whether or not this is true, I cannot account for them, since I have not witnessed any of these with my own eyes. The dark dweller is a horrid, undead creature that is awakened through sacrifice. From the blood that pours down into the ground, the beast is created that consists of everything that lies in the earth. Normally, that would include branches, earth, bone parts, and other things that have ended up in the ground beneath a sacrificial place, but there are also dark dwellers made from half-rotting corpses and sacrificial loge. It is easy to awaken a new dark dweller in places where one has been awakened previously. The more blood that has been spilled on the ground, the greater the dark dweller will be. It is not unusual for several dark dwellers to be awakened if the blood has flowed in great amounts and the ground is rich with components. The attributes of a dark dweller shift depending on what type of landscape has bred it forth. The most common dark dweller has a body like that of a human or an animal, or one or more heads, and can come from both human and animals. In addition, dark dwellers usually wear several body parts from humans and animals to make their protection and armor. A dark dweller can have a variety of appearances, since they often are awakened in places that are plentiful with bits of pieces of corpse or past sacrifices. The shape of a dark dweller is up to chance. Some walk on 2 legs, others on 4, but it is not unusual for a dark dweller to make their way forth on 3, 5, or 6 legs. In the same way, there is nothing that says the dark dweller must have 2 arms and 2 heads, or 1 head. It is just as likely that it will have 3 arms and 2 heads or more. The dark dwellers grow and become more dangerous as it tastes more blood. By lying down on its victims, the dark dweller will meld with the victim and thus grow larger and stronger. Since new victims mean more bloody parts, the dark dweller's appearance will change every time it grows, and it can gain new attributes and abilities thanks to the newly gained parts. Demon. When I was a small boy, my father and I participated in a winter fair in Irvidor, where I first heard about the creatures of darkness. It was the knowledge-hungry Gavalian Ekord Ros who told me about the dark time before Gave, about the time when people lived with murky minds, Ercole told about the demons' horrific forces and their horrible influence on everything that was weak and ignorant. Many years later, I learned of Eckhart Rose. He had written a tome about demons, the mighty Iorjon, the Book of Demons. Eckhart was the first one to use the word Ior. When speaking of demons, Ior is an abbreviation of the Elvish word Iorfalnegen, which means dark force or obscure body. Eckhart said that there were cosmic beings, gods, which gave was supreme and only. Then there were the spirits, those who could walk between worlds. Lastly, Eckhart described demons, the ones that were created out of darkness and belonged neither to gods or spirits. The demons could hide themselves in the cosmic world, in the world of spirits, and everywhere there was darkness. Often demons were volatile creatures that could be destroyed with light and knowledge. But sometimes the darkness was so compact that it created a body, an entity of pure evil. The demon was described as a manifestation of all darkness that is accumulated. Some demons were so physical that they assumed a real body, and others existed by consolidating power in thoughts, winds, emotion, and other things that were fleeting and volatile. The physical demons hide in the crevices of time and could enter Trudvang only by powerful rituals or portals. The intangible demons were easier to destroy, but all the more treacherous, as they could hide in a good man's dark thoughts, in the center of a storm, or in the capricious forces of the seasons. Eckhart Rouse became an old man, and when I, in my elder days, took up the task to map out the beasts and creatures of Trudvang, the old Gavelian summoned me. He laid on his deathbed and wished to speak with me. With a swift horse, I made my way from Ervedor to the small village of Lucifal to meet him. During what became Eckhart's last night of his life, he shared with me further knowledge about the dreadful creatures that are the demons. He told of the places in Trudvang where he thought one of the several demons were hiding, places that I have never heard of, but which I was given the opportunity to visit later in life. Eckhart also delivered a prophecy that frightened me. He said that Westmark again would be thrown into war and darkness, where the might of silver had become too great. Disir. The Stormlanders commit sacrifice often and willingly to their gods to receive divine abilities or to ask for a favor. However, one sacrifice is not related to their religion, the so-called Disir sacrifice. A Disir is a spirit that does not walk as a reanimated corpse, but lacks a physical body altogether. Often one cannot see or hear a Disir. Men and women with whom I have spoken that claim to have encountered a spirit from the Misthal speak of shivers moving slowly through their spines, but it is seldom that such folktales speak of actually seeing the spirits. To sacrifice in the honor of a Disir is to attempt to be rid of a Disir that has settled down in a place and haunting the one who lives there. The sacrificial gifts are often fine jewelry, fruit, or handicrafts in different sizes and shapes. Putting out a mug of milk is considered to keep the Disir at bay. To my knowledge, most Disirs are neither dangerous nor evil. For some unknown reason, they have had a hard time cutting the bonds of our world, and therefore they remain here. Some Disirs, the Dark Disirs, are made from dark Vitner and considered to be dangerous. They can also take on a physical shape, often in the form of a skeleton, but that type of Disir is rare. I have been told that a dark Disir can be destroyed only with prayers of power, or with Vitner that is pure and bright. Neither cutting weapons nor force can help against them. The Disir is a disembodied ghost whose spirit and power are derived from a deceased person. The ghosts come in a variety of guises, some evil and violent, and others are loving and helpful. And some most easily described as lost and brooding, with no knowledge of why they are there or how they got there. In the mighty forest of Disra, I had the misfortune to encounter a sinister Disir, whose only purpose in Trudvang was to feed on the souls of the living. This particular Disir was so strong that it even sucked the power out of the surrounding nature, which was reflected in that the colors around the Disir disappeared. But on other occasions I have encountered Disirs whose purposes have been far from unpleasant. Once when I was little, I met my dead great-grandfather, who told me to be strong in my faith. Another time I met an old woman's spirit who wanted nothing more than to see her grandson. Her will to do this had been so strong that she had managed to get to the world of the living. The people of the village where I found her were far from happy. They had problems with the restless spirit for some time. The villagers told me that how ghosts always appeared alongside a child's crib and had scared all the youngins who refused to go to bed at night. Since no one had the courage to confront the Disir, I did the only right thing, and I set a trap. After a long and laborious persuasions, I was given permission to borrow a child who was crying and never seemed to cease, so I figured I could use them to lure forth the Disir. I gave the child a concoction that made him fall asleep, and it was not long until the ghost appeared. I spoke with the Disir for a while, and she explained her anguish. I asked her to come back next night, just after dusk, and then the very nice ghost of the old woman disappeared. I strolled directly to the villager's spokesman and told him that the Disir was searching for her grandson. It turned out that the family had moved to another village after the old woman had passed away. A message was sent to the neighboring village, and right before dusk the day after, the family rode into the village. It was a loving reunion I witnessed when the darkness fell. Since that night, the children of the village have always gone to sleep with a smile on their faces. Since 7 well-filled books would not do to describe the many faces of the Disir, I have chosen to generalize them into 3 categories: the wicked, the lost, and the helpful. The wicked. There can be breadth of reasons for a wicked Disir's wrath. Perhaps someone was killed, and the deceased felt a need to return to the world, living to seek revenge. Perhaps the deceased already carried great seeds of evil that bloomed when the person's soul left the world of the living. Whatever the reason, a ghost has to return to our world. Their evil is always wreathed. A soul that was only somewhat annoyed when they lost their life becomes furious when they return to their unearthly life. A soul that was furious when they left Trudvang becomes lost beyond control when it cannot return with its mind wreathed. The hate for the living is so strong that the Disir forgets the original cause of their anger and wreaks havoc on everything that they encounter. And for each soul that they devour, their hatred for the living increases. Often the wicked will haunt a place not far away from the one where they died. Sometimes, though a trick of destiny, they can be ripped from the world of the living into a seemingly random place in Trudvang, like the Disir I met in the forest of Disra. The Lost. The lost ghosts are the Disir that for one reason or another have remained in the world of the living. Honestly, I cannot understand why this happens. Perhaps it is the manipulations of Vitner that makes it hard for the spirits to leave Trudvang, or the Raud was so non-existent that they simply missed Misthal when their thin thread of fate was broken. Often the lost do not remember their past lives, remaining filled with worry without rest in places that they once lived. Sometimes they continue their lives without understanding that they are actually dead. When you encounter such lost souls, you should not fear them, even if they are at times quite capricious. After all, the forces that lash out from Misthal have wreathed them. In truth, it is very rare for such spirits to pose any true threat to anyone. One should always try to aid the lost Disir, partly because one should be good, and partly because the ghosts often reward those who help them reach some insight. What reward this might entail can differ from case to case. The worried can become filled with peace. The poor one can find a silver coin, and the almost blind can be granted their sight back. In the time of the lost old lady who wanted to meet her grandson, the reward was that the children of the village always fell asleep with a smile on their face. For my own account, after I once helped a small child's spirit return to the realm of the dead, I received a revelation that where I could find a particular book that I never thought I would find. The helpful. It's often when someone has been robbed of life in a bad way or has been exposed to great evil that their soul returns as a helpful spirit. It does this to take vengeance upon those who tormented or killed them. Their willpower is so strong that they return to Trudvang without being wreathed by evil, and they are often incapable of claiming this revenge themselves. Therefore, these spirits try to help others who also have suffered at the hands of the same killer. How they offer their help depends on the strength of the ghost. Sometimes it may be strong enough to open a locked door. Sometimes it may be strong enough to whisper a secret into someone's ear, and sometimes it may be so strong that it can lift an object through the air and give it to someone in need. Drogar. There are few who can tell the difference between a Drogar and a Barrowite. Many things are alike about the two, such as the fact that one often finds them in the barrows and cairns of an old battlefield, and the Drogar is, however, not bound to a physical body in the same way that the Barrowite is. It changes its form in both size and physique. Many Drogar can transform into smoke. The Drogar is an undead creature that lives between our world and the Dimhol. But the bond with Dimhol is so strong that the Drogar needs to drink blood in order not to be completely disappear from Trudvang. This has led to the Drogar constantly being on the hunt for blood so that they can survive. If a Drogar can consume blood regularly, it can live for thousands of years. There are stories about a 1,000-year-old Drogar in the northern part of Midland. Glum is his name. Once upon a time, Glum was a great warrior, so some even say that he was a king. He made his own army, and there were many who gathered at his side. He was a wise man, and many said that he could see into the future. In a vision, Glum saw his own death, and it was no fair sight. By his closest men, he was to be slain. Pierced by both spears and swords, he would be buried alive in a barrow. He shared his vision with those who sat by his table, ate his food and drank his ale. They all said that Glam was the greatest hero they knew, and that none wished any harm upon him. Glam let the vision slip, and thought that he might have seen wrongly. Years passed, and Glam's power grew. It grew so that many had said that none of the old kings in Midland could challenge him. With great power came jealousy from the men who had sworn to protect Glam. In a conspiracy, they brought him down, and the prophecy about his death became true. He cursed them all to live in the mist, just as they had laid the last stone above his barrow. Today, people in Midland speak of a Glam oath as an oath that one enters when and then breaks in treason. It is unclear to me, but perhaps this is what creates a Drugar, a treachery, a pact that is broken, or the killing of someone who trusts others. The Drugar is an undead creature that is driven by vengeance and hatred. Because of this great hatred, it has managed to tame the bonds of death, and thus remains in a place where it died. Therefore, it most likely that one will encounter a Drugar in places where great battles or wars have been fought. In fact, in such places, it is not uncommon to encounter more than one Drugar, since many poor souls have been lost there. In rare cases, some Drugar have such a profound hatred that they have traveled to a place that had significant meaning to them, and where they were able to bind themselves to that place instead of the one where they were robbed of their lives. Depending on how much time has passed since the Drugar has died, returned to the world of the living, their body can be different in different stages of decay. Everything from a seemingly untouched body to bare parts of bone. The more intact the body is, the more powerful the might of the Drugar is considered to be. The skin of the Drugar, if it has any skin, has a lifeless gray to it, and the color of the eyes disappears so that they are only black pupils. The strength of a Drugar is measured in the number of days it can remain alive in Trudvang. This determines the ability. If the Drugar is a mere skeleton, it is not as powerful and will not waste any strength performing abilities. Lichtgube. Everyone knows that the fog attracts beings of mist, like a light attracts night flyers, but that bogs and marshes do the same. I think only a few know. It is during my many wanderings in Vistia that I understood that this was the case, or at least suspected it, for during my long travels, both far and wide across Trudvang, I have never seen so many wisps and lichtgubes as I saw during my days in the marshes of Vicentia. Lichtgubes are undead creatures that are bound to the marsh or bog. Their bodies are covered in a dry layer of mud that both conceals and holds together their rotting form. Most iconic for the Lichtgubes are the eyes that are the background for its name. Its eyes glow like the moon and are milky and foggy in color, and if you look closely, you can see that the fog is in constant movement. Myling. I willingly admit that in Westmark there are those who still believe that Myling is the undead form of a child, and that was not introduced to the teachings of Gave before it was murdered by the mother and then hidden in a bog for an unknown wilderness. The priests do their best to strengthen this belief. All research that I have done has shown that the Mylings does not belong to the world of the undead at all. Instead, it is a sly and cunning mischief maker that uses its childlike appearance to lure wanderers off the path. The Myling is a creature that thrives in groups in the deep forests, subsisting on lesser beasts such as birds, rodents, and fish. It has a home near a water source, and Mylings are excellent swimmers, even if they prefer a life on land. Some historians speak of Mylings as mystical guides that can ask for gifts in payment for their guidance through the many paths of the deep forests. Such gifts could be to give a Myling your name. If you do so, the Myling will possess your soul. This may sound unbelievable, but in the world of Vintner, it would not surprise me in the least if the Myling actually has such ability. One will most often find Myling when the sun is about to set during the night. They prefer their own goddess and more than willingly commit sacrifices in her honor. A hilltop I visited in Runvik that was said to belong to the Myling revealed a bloody sacrificial place where someone had sacrificed animals and human beings upon a stone altar in front of a female statue with a formidable bosom. The Meatlanders were very frightened and upset, since this meant that the Myling had begun sacrificing and they would not be content. They had heard Mylings grow stronger by sacrificing to their mistress goddess. I cannot say if the sacrificial place truly belonged to the Mylings, but I can be certain that in the periphery of my view, I saw childlike creatures sneak up upon us in the forest near the hilltop. The Myling is as big as a child. It is a being of nature that mostly lives near water and marshes. They speak in a tongue that consists of a gathering clicking sound, which none but they understand. Just as some species of birds have learned to mimic the tongue of humans, the Myling have a likewise manner learned to mimic the speeches of human. One of the sentences that they have learned better than any other, and one day that they would speak even when no one is around, is, "Give me thy name." This is also the origin of the many stories that giving your name to a Myling means that you will lose your soul. When a Myling encounters one or more humans, it will try to stall them for a long time as possible so that the Mylings can come to the scene, more Mylings can come to the scene, and it does this by mimicking everything the humans say, which can be frightening, especially when several Myling are repeating the same words. Often the Myling repeat the sentence, "Give me thy name." Somehow the Mylings know whether the person provides their real name or not. If they gather the true name of the person, they are satisfied and leave. If they do not receive the true name, the Myling will wait until there are more Mylings close by, perhaps 10 times as many, and then attack. Silhile. I awoke early in the morning from a most horrible headache. The walls of the small tent hung from the morning dew, and I remember how quiet it was. Not at all as lively and filled with animal sounds as I had heard the day before. I was in Trondari to study the old towers in hopes that I would find the last piece of the puzzle, but that is another story entirely. What I'm about to tell unto thee, I do with a trembling hand and absolute horror. From that morning I experienced something I would rather forget. The headache would not relent, even though I had drunk an entire carafe of weak wine to regain some liquid in my body. It was then that the landlord, who normally would produce a good clatter in the morning, brought to my attention that there was nothing to be heard outside. Absolutely flabbergasted, I opened the tent to depart unto the summer's morning, but instead of the sun's warm rays, I was met with a completely enveloping and thick fog. Like the living thing, a tentacle of fog sought its way into my tent with a great curiosity, as if to see what was in there. Carefully, I stepped out from in front of the tent and into the fog. I would be lying if I said that I saw any further than 10 paces in my direction. An annoyingly low murmuring called my attention. At first, I thought it was the headache playing a trick on me, but soon the murmuring transformed into a sharp sound, just within the limits of my hearing, that made me clutch my own ears. Suddenly the sound disappeared, and once again everything was as quiet as the grave. I looked around and saw the tents of the landlord, and at once made my way there, but both tents were empty. The fire in the fireplace between the tents had faltered, and only a few glowing embers remained. However, a few pieces of firewood were there, which the landlord must have put there not too long ago. I called for him, but received no answer, only silence. Perhaps he was out emptying the rabbit traps. Confused and frightened, I took a few steps into the fog. After taking a handful of paces from the camp, I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Acting on pure instinct, I took shelter behind a rock. With my back against the rock, I felt a bit embarrassed for my sudden leap, since it might have been the landlord coming back to the camp after emptying his rabbit traps. Carefully, I peeked beyond my shelter. What I saw made my blood run cold. I had to practice great restraint in order not to let out a shriek of pure horror. Upon this stone, only a few paces away, stood a salhele, a skeleton, staring straight at me with its empty eye sockets. I will never forget the sound as it quickly opened and closed its jaws so that the teeth clashed against one another. Perhaps some form of communication took place in that moment, for soon another samhile sailed in through the fog and took its place just by the first one. Both stood there smattering with their jaws in a most unusual, awful orchestra. The first one pointed toward me with its bony finger. I turned to flee, only to discover that a bony horse upon which the salhele had hunched over, I was trapped. In order to flee, I would have to fight for my life. The diffuse moment in the fog made me realize that there were 3 undead, and they were not the only ones out there. I prepared myself for mortal combat and grabbed a piece of firewood that luckily lay just by my hiding place near the rock. I would at least be able to crush one of the unholy salhiles before they got to me. With the firewood held high above my head with both hands, I rose and prepared for the first strike. 2 of the undead were advancing toward me with old rusty weapons, ready to slice my limb from limb. Suddenly, they stopped and turned their hollow skulls to the east. Their jaws labored vigorously to communicate, and then they turned and headed west, without even looking my way. Just as they did, the fog disappeared. Just then it seemed as if I was standing in the midst of a most normal morning. Apart from the missing landlord, the fog had not dispersed. When it did, it would probably be dead. He would probably be dead in the ground. I would probably be dead in the ground right now. I gave thanks to Gave, for he had allowed me to live for a longer time. What happened to the landlord, I do not know to this very day. Creatures of nature. Creatures in this category are those that, in one way or another, draw their life from Trudvang's forces such as Vintner, Mistal, and nature itself. I have tried to map out and gather as many of Trudvang's natural beings as possible, but the more one studies, the more one will realize that you can only scratch the surface of what truly lurks out there. Several creatures of nature seem to exist under different names depending on where in Trudvang you are. Take, for example, the Stormlandian Hafsruven, the Westmarchian Mermaid, or the Midlandian Marmil. Different names for nymphs whose powers and abilities differ only marginally. Or take the mare that goes under the name of Trollmare, Litha, and Dream Banshee. In this section, I present my own experience with creatures of nature. I am, however, very much aware of the fact that what I write herein might not completely match the details of similar creatures in other places in Trudvang, so I ask you as a reader to simply bear with me. Beasts. The beast is a troll-like creature whose happy helpfulness can easily be exchanged for pure meanness. It likes to dwell in the forest and keeps the Idras as its closest friends and the Hildar as its greatest enemies. Loggers and folk of the wood can almost always expect to be helped by a beast, but one should beware. It's cunning, and often it thinks that it knows best. Those who disagree or in any way go against the will of the beast will be punished. Many folk of the woods and hunters have had their tools destroyed after becoming enemies with its most powerful trickster. Time is not important to the beasts, and it will sometimes prolong an activity beyond what is necessary just to annoy someone. Folks of the woods that I have spoken with have often said that the worst thing one can do is say no thank you to a beast that offers its help. It sees this as a direct insult and will do everything in its power to destroy the offender. The best thing one can do, according to many woodcutters and folks of the wood, is to avoid the beast altogether. One can do this most easily by setting fir tree branches on the fire and letting the smoke lie heavy. The beast hates both fire and smoke from the fir tree branches. To not anger the beast, one can put a pot of rabbit stew on the outskirts of the camp. Often this keeps the beast at bay. In Runvik, it is not uncommon that people warn of the farm beast, which often lives by a farm and helps people with day-to-day labor. The reason for the warning is that it won't be helpful, but rather that it can be very difficult to get rid of the little creature. People tell of farmers who fell completely into the hands of a farm beast and lost control of their own farm. Of course, one can slay the crooked creature, but generally, and especially in Runvik, it is considered bad luck to kill a beast. On almost all farms I have visited, they would tell stories of cattle that died because someone had killed a beast. Where the beast comes from, where it dwells, and how it lives, these things are shrouded in mystery. It seems like their only need is to smoke their pipes, and no one is more grateful than a beast when someone can spare some tobacco. It is said that the beast will always remember anyone who spares it tobacco. People say that a beast often grows as big as a goblin, but the only time I encountered a beast during my travels, it was as small as a hand. I believe it or not, an extraordinary tiny creature with a bitter look on its face that was neither helpful nor talkative. Perhaps the size of the beast has to do with its age, for I have heard that a beast seems to shrink with age and at last disappears altogether. The beasts that I met appeared to be very old. Fairy. Where there are fairies, there is also drinkable water, plenty of mushrooms to eat, and a neat bed of moss to lie down upon. This is a saying in Meatland, where fairies are said to be easily found. Despite being small creatures, they are unusually shy and do not become visible very often. During nighttime, they give off a lovely light like fireflies, but during the day they hide in their dens. The easiest way to lure forth a fairy is to spread honey on a walnut and hang it from a string on a tree. This was what I did the first and only time I met a fairy. When there were more than one of them, at least 10 fairies fought for the honey-dipped walnut. It is said that fairies bring luck, which is why certain evil people hunt them and capture them. They die very easily in captivity, and if it is true that they bring luck, this luck will be short-lived. It is also true that where there are fairies, there are often elves and Yidras. It seems as if the three creatures are connected in some way. Perhaps it's nature itself that they share. Others say that elves, fairies, and Yidras are in fact the same creatures in different forms. I am skeptical about this, since I have encountered all three myself. Fairies are short-lived and unpredictable and do not carry deep knowledge as the Yidras do. Perhaps there is some truth to the myth that when an elf dies, a fairy is born. A fairy is a beautiful, thin creature with small, fragile wings that dances during the night. They are short in stature, roughly 10 centimeters long, with wings and red or blonde hair. All fairies appear in womanly form, but in truth, they have no gender. They can become invisible at times. Fairies speak a special language, namely the language of the fairy, which only they understand and converse in. This language bears similarities with a song of birds and the buzzing of bees. Sometimes there are one or two fairies in a company, and a company of them can speak through telepathy. The social structure of the fairies is split into many different positions that all work under a queen. Everything that happens in the forest must go through several stages of bureaucracy before any decision can be made. In spite of this, the fairies protect and keep the forest with constant devotion. Each type of fairy is thoroughly measured and cared for by a group of drone fairies that work together on this crucial task. The fairies have a healing power that they share with the animals and beings of the forest. Even people passing by can, in rare cases, receive their help if the need is dire. However, a forest is big and majestic, and the decision of the fairies can take some time, so their help might come too late if it comes at all. Fairies can also heal wounded or tired animals. They see no difference among creatures and will help everyone from the most wounded to the least, no matter who or what they are. A person who has been helped by a fairy feels great happiness, kindness, and such peace that they cannot perform any harmful actions for the rest of the day. Firbrudgisk. During the time of seeking more knowledge about the beasts of Trudvang, I willingly admit that I became obsessed with mushrooms. Most had no special traits or quirks other than being good to eat, like the kustal mushroom, from which the dwarves brew mead. But one mushroom deserves its place in the bestiary, the Firbrudgisk. It is a horrid beast whose often effect will keep even the bravest explorer walking in the deep forests. The first time I heard of the Firbrudgisk was in the Majordian town of Malduna. There is a man who discovered the mushroom by chance when he visited the Volkruk forest. He told me that the Furdurisk begins as a parasitic flower on the bark of a fir tree and spreads its seeds to gain hold and sprouts its roots into living flesh. Slowly but surely, the mushroom breaks down the meat and makes it rot. The man told me that such a fungus has taken hold in his arm, and that he had no other option but to remove the limb, for the mushrooms had grown to eat his whole forearm. As if this was not bad enough, he explained that when the mushroom has killed a body and eaten all the meat, it evolves into a new, more powerful stage of being. Within a few days of the body dying, the Furbludisk creates a symbiosis with the skeleton and harvests life once more. This time, the mushroom is the one in control, and its only purpose seems to be to infect new bodies. In this way, the man explained, one can see wandering skeletons that have been reanimated and controlled as if they were an extension of the consciousness of the mushroom. The latter made me grow quite skeptical. A few years later, I was provided with another explanation, that the dead do not come back to life, but rather the mushroom grows in strength to power the skeleton in such a way that it seems to move on its own. Yet another explanation is that the horrible way the victim dies causes such suffering that it becomes undead, which is in effect the effect of the process rather than something directly set in motion by the Furbludisk. The Furbludisk grows only in the fir trees and forests that lie south of Darkwood. The northern forests are considered too cold for mushrooms. The flowers that grow in the trees are reddish and well camouflaged on the bark. The capsule of the flower can sense vibration in the ground around the tree and will open when animals or other living creatures come close by. Then it will unleash its spores and sprout its roots in the creature's flesh. Slowly but surely it will eat its way toward the brain of the victim to seize control of its mind. As it does so, the Furbludisk will take control of the creature and steer it toward a place where the mushrooms can sprout more fully. Usually in an area where there are other animals and creatures. When the mushroom takes control of humans, elves, or dwarves, it is especially dangerous since it seeks larger settlements, and in this fashion whole farms and villages can perish. The Furbludisk is extremely aggressive, and it can and creatures that are controlled by the mushrooms will exhibit similar behavior. The victims grow slow-minded like grey trolls, but as violent as berserkers and forest trolls. Grendel. I am unsure how long we have been in that stinking bog. Perhaps one moon cycle, perhaps more. The stench from the half-rotten tree whose roots sought their way down into the water, and the constant buzzing of the bloodflies was never-ending. Already, a day earlier, we had been warned. We were heading into the bog where rumors of a Grendel that lived there. Traces of their ruins and hilltops were everywhere, and it was said that the people who worshipped the Grendel once lived there. I had no great hope that we could catch a glimpse of this mythical monster. I had heard that it showed its foul face only during the night, and it was more scared of this creature than I was many others. Sometimes it was good to know when not to challenge destiny. Suddenly, we were lost in the bog, and I reached a permanent impasse. It was then that we first heard the strange snorting sound that is the trademark of the Grendel. Thereafter, our small canoe was close to being overturned by the waves of the Grendel as it leaped from its nest down into the water. The men in the boat screamed, and never before have I heard or seen such absolute and utter panic. We rowed for all we could hold dear on this good earth, and it was likely that we escaped death just barely. The horror lasted for days, and my little glimpse of the giant creature was forever etched in my mind. The men of the marshlands told me of a beast that was magical and created from dark Vitner. On Soj, the fear of the Grendel is great, and in certain places people sacrifice in honor of the beast so that it won't find its way to their human villages. Much points to the Grendel having its roots of origin in Midland. There is a Midlandian song that says, "O thou warrior, O thou hero, O thou proud friend of King Heroth of the 12 crowns, breaker of the neck of the beast Grendel, forcer of the arms and legs. Beowulf is thy name, and Grendel shalt always fear thy legacy." Beowulf is thy name, and furthermore, we shall be in thy debt. In writings, not much else is said about the Grendel. What is known is that Heroth was of the Thronlandian blood, and that he was a king of the 12 kingdoms. It is said that he had an enemy named Grendel, who was hunted and fled. For many years Grendel hid with his mother in the enchanted bog, and it twisted him into a monster. Many attempts were made to slay Grendel, but the one who at last succeeded was the hero Beowulf. He learned that Grendel could not be harmed by weapons, fire, or steel. He had become a creature that was protected by Vitner. The only way to best him was through raw strength of the body. But before Beowulf killed Grendel, the monster managed to have a child with a Kelpie, and their spawn spread across Trudvang. On 2 occasions in my travels I have heard of the dangerous Grendel, and both times I have taken to the muddy pond in the deepest forest where the creature was thought to live. The marshland monster is said to carry the same hatred and jealousy against humans as it did its forebears. There are few writings and songs or stories about Grendel's dwelling in Westmark. The creature seems to be found primarily in Soj, Midland, and in some cases the Stormlands. It seems certain that the Grendel is under the influence of the Vitner. All stories that I have heard say that it cannot be damaged by Vitner prayers or other, but only by physical struggle, man on man. Haptya. Haptya, that is what people call the horrid creatures that live in the shadows and leaves high on the trees, feasting on both human and animals, if she can. Sometimes one can encounter several Haptyas at the same time, even though they prefer to be alone. I have with my own eyes seen how a Haptya folds their wings together and burrows into her feathers, waiting for dusk to fall, then attacks her target with full force. The Haptyas look like a dirty old woman with eyes that glow white in the night, and rugged wings that hold up her naked body when she flies. Perhaps she is a mix of an owl and a woman, or perhaps she is a shapeshifter of a seldom seen kind. I can, as always, only guess. It is said that the one who is patient and has something beautiful to use as a lure might encounter a Haptya, which will speak an ancient dragon language. I must, however, warn the brave soul that when I tried this in my youth, I barely escaped with great wounds across my face to show for it. To avoid being attacked by predators, Haptyas live in the branches of high trees in the great nest that they take over and build out. Haptyas are extremely territorial and become very aggressive if someone enters their turf, especially if someone discovers where she is brooding high up in her tree. In these cases, she will usually attack fiercely, only to disappear if the threat seems too great. The feathers of the Hopja are highly prized and very valuable. It is said that they are magical and contain Vitner that wizards can use when his own has run out. It is also said that the arrows clad with the feathers of the Hopjas never miss their mark. Hulder. Where the forest is deepest, the enchantment greatest, close to a brook or waterfall, not where the oaks grow, but there one will find the Hulder. Unusually, however, she finds you first. She is a strange creature that likes to tie trolls, animals, and other creatures of mischief to her belt. Her power with Vitner is strong, and once you are at her mercy, it is hard to be free of her. There are those who claim that the only way to break free from a Hulder's bewitchment is to slay her. To carry acorns in one's pockets is said to shield oneself from her spells, but one would do best by avoiding her altogether. Those who stay in the forest and the woods for any prolonged time are most likely to encounter her. Anyone who hears her bright laughter should turn around at once and hurry in the opposite direction. She is very fair and attractive from the front, but anyone looking at her back will notice her resemblance to a hollow and rotten log. Men of the wild who say they have faced a Hulder told me she is always surrounded by king trolls and other creatures of mischief. It seems as if the Hulder has some sort of power that attracts these wicked creatures. A Hulder looks like a very beautiful woman on the front of her body, and most often she wears no clothes. The only telltale sign of her true nature is the fact that she has a tail of a cow, and sometimes her back looks like a hollow, rotten log. The Hulder lives in the forest and surrounds herself with different types of trolls and animals that she has managed near a small waterfall deep in the forest. Sometimes a Hulder will dig a small den beneath a rock where she will gather her belongings. The Hulder's only chance of breeding is to have a child with a male human. Therefore, she will often use her powers to bewitch humans more than other races. Kelpie. There are not very many positive things I have to say about Vesethia. The choking air, the stinking marshes, and the accursed blood flies that suck both blood and marrow from grown men makes me think with great decisiveness that I will never set foot there again. It is perhaps it is not so strange that few make any greater claims to that land, since most of it consists of marshlands and treacherous bogs. My hate for Vesethia was only made greater when I fell in the water and lost several valuable notes and images that I had produced, including a tome concerning the various types of families and variations of mushrooms in Trudvang. There are many who still believe that the Kelpie come from the realm of Mistal. But this is not the case at all. It has many traits that other undead creatures do, but my research points to it being darkspawn. Not completely unlike the Grendel, created partially from the blackest Vitner and partially from the environment that they exist in. For Kelpie lives in ponds and bogs, deep lakes and moors. They are a very dangerous creature that seem like it wants help, but most often will only lead you astray and take you down into the water, where it will drown you. The stories tell of a beautiful horse, but when I laid my eyes upon the Kelpie in Vesethia many years ago, I saw a dark and malevolent horse, perhaps I saw its true self. The Kelpie did not see me, as it was lying hidden in the reeds a ways off. However, everything began with us leaving Vinton behind. It was a very strange town built on poles in the middle of the marshlands. Certainly a good way to defend a town, but I cannot understand who would want to live there. Southwest of Vinton lies a moody and inaccessible marshland called Goldland. We had it not been for the fact that one could find valuable rock snipe eggs in Goland, I do not think that any living soul would find their way there. I followed a group of egg collectors and made my way into the marshlands with a canoe. I did not take long until the blood flies had made me fall into a deep fever and a state of dizziness. When I woke, we were deep in the marshlands, and the idea of getting out of there without help of the egg collectors seemed as futile as fighting with the loja worm with a torch. During the night, we had to beware of the lichtgubes and the meilings, and during the days we watched out for the bloodflies. The knowledge I gathered from the egg collectors was that the Kelpie lives alone, has a large turf, and in very rare cases wields Vitner or other witchcraft. It is said that the Kelpie stinks worse than a pile of corpses, and that this stench is the easiest way to know whether one has been steered into Kelpie turf. Other things that one can hear about the Kelpie is that one can cook a soup from its horsehair that will cure the fear of water, and the servants of evil collect Kelpie teeth to let them swim under the surface of the water for extended periods of time. Log Troll. In Midland, I once found a tome about dark elves. It was written by an unknown author, but contained so much information that I stayed there for almost half a year to absorb it. Some was written in the old tongue, other parts in Vitner writing, and another part in Dwarven runes. The author was indeed knowledgeable in both great and little details concerning the dark elves. The part of the tome that truly interested me was about the Vocali, a creature that the elves would create through rituals, and that their mighty ally would be their mighty ally when it would march to war. Vorlokia was the elven name, but humans called it log troll, or simply an elvish troll. According to the tome, the Vocali can be created only by Ilhana, one of the spiritual elves. They dig a deep hole in the ground and fill it with parts from nature such as pine cones, branches, leaves, and stones. It is common to place metal objects, parts of skeletons from other animals and beasts, and different cavern decorations in the hole. It is also common for the Twoloki to carve a face for its creation. When all of this has been done, the elf places a seed from an unusual star pine in the hole and fills it in. For 30 days and 30 nights, the seed takes hold in the hole as the elves chant a mantra over and over again. No details of the mantra were given in the tome. I suspect that this is a well-kept secret, perhaps even among the elves. After 30 days, a creature will rise from the hole, ready to serve its creator. It is said that the Volakia is a wild and unpredictable creature that is best suited for battle. Many years later, I encountered a group of wild folk in Darkwood that had fought a Volakia on several occasions. They spoke of the beast that was as wild as a berserker of the Stormlands and hardened like a Stonehinge. The wild folk said that the fire was the best way to fight the beast. They also said that the creature was the same thing as a dark dweller, but I doubt this for several reasons. First, it seems as if the Volokya can be created only by elves, and second, it can be years. It can be controlled only by its maker. When in my twilight years, I spoke with a dark elf about his beast, he only shook his head and looked toward the stars. He said that it was a plague that never should have seen light of day, and I never got more out of him. Logi. The Logi lives in the mighty underground lava rivers where it is hot. So hot that only the most hardened Boratyab dwarves can dwell there. It is also that these dwarves that hunt and capture the Logi to use as a mystical Logi oven, and which the dwarves forge the most magical things. It is hard to retrieve any information about the Logi, particularly because the creatures live in a place that a human cannot reach, and partially because the Boratyab dwarves are not very talkative. Therefore, my information on the Logi is sparse and solely from a third-party source, namely that the Bornica dwarves, namely by Bornica dwarves. What they told me about the Logi are fairy tales that often have to do with fire, or stories about dwarves that are devoured by the mountain and reborn as Logi. For as wrapped in legend and myth is this fiery creature that the dwarves have many long stories about it. The Logi lives close to fire and lava rivers, and it feeds off of the fire and devours its warmth with a hunger that can be likened to that of a lindworm. Sometimes a Logi will move away from the lava rivers, but usually happens only when they have been conquered by other Logi, or if the lava of which they live has begun to run cold or hard. Such Logi are covered by a black surface that hardens, but it's again transformed into fire as soon as the creature comes in contact with heat. Mare. In the western lands, the mare have many names: Litha, Nightmare, Trollmare, Dream Banshee, just to name a few. People used to believe that the mare was a manifestation of a demon that had reached our world, and I had spent many years to prove that the mare is actually a physical creature that shares many traits with the Holder and the Troll King. One of the most important traits of the mare is that it became invisible on certain days. It is said that this power is especially strong when the moon glows bright. At such times, the mare sneaks into households and bewitches people who forget to lock their doors properly. The mare stuns its victims by kissing them, a so-called mare's kiss. And then she will strangle them slowly as she sucks the life force from them, as if it's the essence of life that she lives off of and not flesh and blood. Most people who get mare-kissed fall into a long and deep sleep. Some never wake up, but instead lie numb in their bed until old age takes them. It is said that those who have been kissed are constantly plagued by nightmares. Anyone touched by a mare should at once seek a blessing from a holy man, which makes the nightmares go away. Usually, the mare lives in a forest or the outskirts of a great wild, preferably close to human settlements. The best way to protect oneself from a mare is to craft a so-called mare's broom to place outside the door. A mare's broom is a broomstick made from birch with a silver shaft. The mare cannot stand the birch or silver. Anyone who manages to capture a mare should rejoice. It is said that the mare will fulfill one's wishes in exchange for being set free. I once heard of a man in Midland that captured a mare and wished for the most beautiful wife in the world. even though he looked like a troll. He got what he wished for, and it is said that the woman he married was half-elven. The mare lives its physical life in the outskirts of the forest. Most often she will appear as a shy and kind, like someone lost or in need of help. She will do anything to come into physical contact with the victim. Therefore, she will attempt to escape as fast as she can. The mare will often not choose to fight since her physical prowess is very small. However, some mares have learned magic. The mare's physical form is a bent or crooked like that of an old woman. The face can be taken for a young girl with a small or big horns on her head. Some mares can conceal their horns through illusion. Nymph. The naked feminine creature that one should beware of when close in the wild rapids and water sources of the forest is called a nymph. Many stories and tales warn of her power. The nymph is a very beautiful woman creature that some mistake for an elf. Wanderers tell of a naked woman that lures the folk with her beautiful song and formidable bosom. They say that she can change both appearance and the mind of a man. In truth, a nymph is not very dangerous, but once per year she must mate, and then she will bewitch with her lovely song. Like the holder, the nymph can have children only by a human. The nymph is also known as the mermeal, and it lives both in water and on the land, but mates only at the bottom of the lake or other sources of water. The song that she sings and uses to lure folk is enchanting, and many are the men that have been lured into the water to be drowned. Nymphs can be found all over Trudvang, but prefer the protective shadows and darkness. To compensate for its bad hunting ability, it has developed an enchanting ability. By humming, the nymph can make the audience hear the most beautiful song it has ever heard. If several people who speak different languages hear the song, each hears its own language. The nymph is indeed a strange creature, but even stranger is the warg hare, which always stays close to the nymph. In some ways, it seems as if the two are connected, as if every nymph has a warg hare as its counterpart. The beast is predatory, but never leaves the side of the nymph for any extended time. Perhaps it is a sort of protection or the spirit that the spirit of the nymph can control when in need. The link between the two is a great riddle. Even if I have searched and searched, I have not found a very good answer. Huld. Among the elves are many stories of the Selvheim in Trudvanka. Perhaps the wisest of all elf kings. He was a bearer of traditions, of great measure, and he thought that no other creatures on Trudvang, save for the fjord trolls, bore any claim to the knowledge that the elves had been given by the gods. It is said that he tamed the wild Hulds to watch over the knowledge of the elves, since the Hulds spoke only in riddles. Once in my many travels, I saw a Huld, and at the time only a glimpse of it, for they live in the shadows of the forest and use camouflage in the unending crowns of woods. But hear me when I say that unto thee the creature is as dangerous to encounter as it is filled with riddles. we decided not to tread any further into the land when what the Hild guarded. I was told that it was a braiding garden, a place where elves braided the dead ones so that they could again be one with creation, and that the trees would bring the leaves high up into the crowns so that they could gaze upon the stars and the night sky, even though they were not alive to truly see it. Some say that in this way the Yidras are born, but I have my doubts. However, it is my guide who told me that each Hild is positioned to guard a special area. They will defend their territory with their lives. Ever since Silhin tamed the first Hild, the beasts have been loyal to the elves and their traditions. The Hild is clad in wings, with legs of a cat and a body of a troll. They have long pointy ears and tusks like a warthog. Their thick hair is raven black and grows like a mane down the back. Hilds are very rare and often stay in the forest near the places abandoned by the elves. They are watchers of a place of special significance or a special knowledge, and to gain access to those, one must wield the right key. More often, the key consists of solving a riddle or having the correct answer to a question. The Hilds will defend the place of knowledge very aggressively. Anyone who tries to break into the place or gain the knowledge without the proper key will meet a dangerous creature that will fight to the death. The Hilds live alone, and only in rare cases will explorers encounter more than one in the same place. This will only be a pair that stand together as watchers. The Hilds is immortal like some elves, but very few are still alive. Often, secrets and riddles that they carry have been passed on from mother to daughter, and in this way the watchers have kept their hidden treasures. The elves view the Hilds as mythical friends and bear great respect for this animal and will never try to harm them. Stonhinge. Bidrutans, Hjörntrusen, Lungerfuten have all caused difficulties in my travels, but it is the Stonhinge that have given me the greatest trouble over the years. How can a giant made completely of stone, with a heart made of gold and a stomach as hollow as a cave, even be alive? Something tells me that the Vintner is indeed involved in keeping this giant alive. The mythical dwarves speak of a special part of the mountain that is alive, and that one can use songs and drums to call forth. Something that is born when the mountain trembles and opens. They speak of a creature that slumbers in the mountain but emerges in the form of a great giant. Sometimes the Stonhinge will decide for itself that when it is time to come forth from the mountain, but most often they are lured out, and at that time they serve the one who called them. I have been told that the Stonhinge exists in many different forms and sizes. Some grow as large as mountains and others only as big as ogres. And there is no doubt that this is a giant creature. It prefers places where mountains lie strong under its feet, and the cold stone brings it great satisfaction. Stonhinges that leave their mountains behind seek to build their own nests of stone. Like Jorgutans, they like to sleep. However, they do not fall into the same long, deep sleep as the Jorgutans. A Stonhinge usually sleeps for 1 year and is awake for the next year. Only Stonhinges can sleep for up to 10 years at a time, but seldom awake more than one year at a time. Everything points to the Stonhinge being immortal as the mountain, but when the time has come for the eternal sleep, they journey into the mountains and become one with the stone. It's sometimes highly unlikely, but dwarves can claim that Stonehinges that are awakened to life more than once. The dwarves also say that some of the prehistoric Stonehinges exist that carry wisdom and that has seen and heard that only the elves and Yidras have. In Nordland, I have encountered wild folk who have killed a Stonehinge to retrieve the heart of gold. They speak of an old but very strong beast. Neither cutting irons nor fire would bring the beast's shell down. After hours of hard fighting, they eventually defeated the giant by crushing it with a block of stone. After another couple of hours of breaking open the beast, they reached its heart of gold. The wild folk proudly displayed the heart, which to my eyes looked like the most beautiful of treasures, not at all as harsh and clumsy as the giant itself. The heart was as big as a man's fist, and even though the wild folk had slain the Stonehinge long ago, it was still warm. Another chronicle that cannot be completely tarnished writes of the soul-given stones, or the Stonehinges, as they are now called, the blocks of stone that were given a soul and could change shape, but from roughly carved stone creatures on two legs to a perfect object. The object would be a door or something else made of stone. The dwarves would often create Stonehinges whose ability was to transform into a door or a wall. In this fashion, the Stonehinges would be set as a guard over a room or a hallway. Sometimes the creatures of the Stonehinge worked in a drop of blood from the one who had asked for the creature to be made, so that the giant would always recognize its master. Stonehinges can also be set to guard an object or the owner of an object. If the object was moved, the Stonehinge would move along with it. There was a piece from a letter that described how the soul giver could choose to give the Stonehinge a consciousness of its own or no consciousness at all. The Stonehinge without consciousness were simply given orders to follow the rest for the rest of their existence. The Stonehinges with consciousness were allowed to be masters of their own lives however they liked, as long as the task that they were given remained their top priority. The latter type of Stonehinges were also given the ability to reproduce themselves, an ability bestowed by the spirit of the mountains. This is done so that the giant would create a version of itself to follow in its footsteps and continue to carry out its assigned task, until the offspring was mature enough to create another copy that in turn would take over the task. Stonehinges can sleep for practically all eternity. What it is that makes them rise and depart from the world, very few know. The personality and appearance of the Stonehinge can be likened to that of a human. Just as there are humans with bad character, there are Stonehinges with bad character and morals. They often choose life like eremites, close to the mountains, but sometimes they will go out into the world until the time comes for them to return and become one with the mountain. There are two types of Stonehinges, those who are born from the mountains and those who are lured forth by the dwarven stone interpreters. All Stonehinges born from the mountain have their own consciousness and live like any other creature, even though this is vastly different from any other animal life, as they neither eat or engage in sexual activity. Stonehinges that have been lured forth by dwarves seldom gain their own consciousness, though on very rare occasions they might. A Stonehinge that has been created without a consciousness is immortal unless destroyed. They can function for practically all eternity. These Stonhinge are often created to fulfill certain purposes, such as to serve as a door, a guardian to attack the uninvited, or a small stone creature whose only mission in life is to keep the place clean. Idras. Trudvang is home to many strange creatures and beings from the world of fairy tales. A very special example are the Idras, which is said to be the most ancient creature in all of Trudvang. They come from the time when the elves wandered with their gods, the Vanir, and it is said that the Idras were linked to one another and were the very soul of nature. But then came the long storm, and the black fire of the dragons tore nature apart, and that which had been one creature now became several. The Idras shelter in the trees, for they lived for a long time and were protected there. But the elves say that there are also Idras hidden in animals and even in flowers. That the fairest rose can be a Idras. Idras originated from the family of creatures known as the Drajols, souls that live in total harmony with nature and also in its protection. Even though the Drajols are very strange creatures, I have met one 3 different occasions. During one of those meetings, I sat with the Idras for several days. He told me about animals and creatures that he had discovered from Trudvang with the passing seasons, and I wish oh so dearly that I had had more time to listen, for it is with songs and hymns that it spoke with other creatures. The Idras sang of the moss-covered tree trolls that have long since disappeared from Trudvang, and also the dragon men who once wandered here. I was most impressed by the creature's long song about the giant spiders. The Idras seem to have unending knowledge about all the beasts of the forest. It is also said that the Idras are one of the very few creatures that have learned to master the hidden magic. Some say it was, in fact, the Idras in the first place that founded and polished the gift of Vintner. I will let it go unsaid which type of magic the Idras master, but let me say this. The Idras that I met could put a broken branch back in its rightful place with only its gaze, or create a bed of flowers or one of moss to sit on with just the tune from its lips. The Idras carry great wisdom and knowledge from the world that they were meant to guard. Few other beings are more equal in this regard. Any knowledge the Idras do not possess has probably been lost to time. All Idras are mentally connected. They can be viewed as a single individual with several bodies. Even so, each body has its own personality and will of its own. That is why the Idras have such great collective knowledge. That which one individual knows or discovers is instantly known by every Idras. With the help of the trees in the forest, they can also extend their consciousness and see into all of the corners of the world, of the woods. There is no common appearance for an Idras, since it hides in nature. If one sees something that looks like a face in a tree, one could almost be certain that the Idras lives there. Most certainly, one could find these souls of nature in the ancient barknut tree that, with their thick and knotty trunk, and they can live for more than the age of a man. The Idras lives in symbiosis with its host tree. The nutrition that the tree takes in through its leaves and roots and branches is shared with the Idras. The Idras provides the tree with an essence that makes it stronger. Often Idras live together in a group of 20 to help each other take care of the forest, like gardens. They are a shy kind, and it is always an Idras that chooses to see someone, not the other way around. The information that they carry can be given out only in small portions, and they do not share information that is too great for other creatures to handle. They often speak in riddles, and that tell very little about outcomes or solutions. Dragons, worms. Oh yeah, maybe we should take a break here. I think we'll break this into 2 parts. Let's start with part 2 for dragons. Yeah, it's been about 2.5 hours. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed going through this. I like how this is written very much. I think that's very charming. Hopefully it was fun to hear. So we'll pick it up from here. We'll do a part 2 because we've still got quite a bit. We've got all the dragons and worms and giants. So we'll finish off with Juten and worms tomorrow. But yeah, so I'll change the name of this to part 1. So thank you for joining me. All right. Oh, cool. Abyss, how's it going? Yeah, and hopefully you can see the art clearly on the stream. It's just so beautiful. This book is just so wonderfully illustrated. And sorry, some of the reading and the art aren't on the same page, but I try to go past it a little bit so you can see it. But yeah, let's do part 2 tomorrow. I thought I could do this all in one go, but some of the passages were quite long. So thank you so much for listening. And part 2 of Jorgi's Bestiary tomorrow. And we'll do all the dragons and giants. That should be fun. So thank you for watching. And yeah, take care, Abyss. And we'll see you next time. And we'll hear some more from Jorgi. Take care and see you tomorrow. Goodbye.